great news this week, guys. If you've been out of the loop, something very cool has been announced by ArenaNet. Not only are they cancelling the rest of the legendary weapons, but the only one to come into the game is the short bow. That means a likely, in a couple of years' time, 50% reduction on the amount of times you see the Dreamer. How fantastic is that? Okay. Hello everybody, welcome to another video. What the hell happened? I got away for 1 week to finish a JRPG and something explodes. Brilliant. Well, yes, there has been something very, very sad, infuriating, annoying announced, and that is the cancellation of all future legendary weapons in GW2. It's kind of crazy, actually, that we're coming out and reading this here. We've obviously seen a lot of turbulence over the past month or so with Colin Johansson's departure, but I wouldn't have expected this to have come from it. Well, I want to talk to you guys about this topic today. I spent a lot of people out into this big spiral. I'll throw my hat into the ring and let you guys hopefully be as informed as possible as you can be on the future of the game. So here is the quote itself from Mo. He says, "Hi all. In the upcoming spring 2016 quarterly update, don't forget we already had the winter one, we'll launch the new legendary short bow known as Chuka and Champawat. This is some reference to tigers or something in Africa. I'm not really sure. The team outdid themselves on this one. This new precursor journey takes you through a memorable experience inspired by a real-world story, and the bow you craft at the end is the perfect commemoration of that journey. I hope you all check it out." So you got to get some time in there when you're delivering bad news to people to convince everyone what you are doing is awesome. And so we get that wonderful, exciting description of the one last legendary weapon there. And then he says this. He says, "Last year, we talked about plans to gradually build out a second set of legendary weapons through live content updates." Actually, Mo, you've been talking about that since 2013, but let's move on. "That's a big responsibility," he says. "We have a team of 6 developers working on that who could work on it for years to come. As game director, I have to make tough trade-offs," he says. "One thing I believe is that we have to focus on the core game first before taking additional responsibilities. I wrote in the Guild Wars 2 design manifesto in 2010 that our vision was to create a living, dynamic world where there's always something to do. Let's ensure we succeed on that front. So after shipping Chuka and Champawats, I've asked that we indefinitely suspend work on the new legendary weapons. This team will instead shift their efforts back to living world-style content, building new journeys and events for everyone to participate in. I know this will be a controversial decision." Boy, was it. "I'll hang out with you for a while on the forums to discuss it, and I'm always available by email." You know, I wonder whether anyone actually took up that opportunity to email him, because there were a handful of responses from Mo on the forums, because obviously there was so much discussion, but not too many from him. Straight away, guys, even if you're not sad about the legendary weapons, like you didn't buy Heart of Thorns to get more legendary weapons, you don't really care about them that much, you should at least still see straight away some inconsistencies with what he's saying here. Let's reread this paragraph. "One thing I believe is we have to focus on the core game first, and that he wanted to create a world where there's always something to do." Well, I don't know about you guys, maybe this is just his personal opinion as game director, but don't legendary weapons, some of the only goals for the game, kind of count as core content? Since when was one of the only end game goals in the entire product classified as an additional responsibility? Isn't the whole point of legendary weapons giving people something to do? So his very logic immediately sits kind of weirdly for me there. I honestly believe when Guild Wars 2 first released, it was thoroughly lacking content at the end game, but the fact it had a full set of legendary weapons totally saved it. And Heart of Thorns is no different. Having just 3 legendary weapons didn't do very much. If it has a full set though, people would have a lot to do and, well, keep playing. I guess you can tell from my tone already, guys, that I completely disagree with Mo's decision here, but I do want to talk about the implications it could mean for the game, fight a little bit for both sides, talk about why I'm so disgruntled on the topic. So this is basically the idea here. We're not getting any more legendary weapons. They seem to be so unhappy with the speed at which the legendary weapons team is making legendary weapons that they're repurposing them for something else. In some ways, I kind of understand why they're doing it. This legendary weapons team seems to have been an abominable failure in terms of actually meeting deadlines. Let's look at this first of all, the "for years to come" comment. Now, presumably, I wouldn't actually have any problems with this. Them developing legendary weapons for years to come is great, except quite clearly what he means here is that it would take them years to finish just a single set. And I'm guessing that they probably want more expansions and more sets ideally out by then. It's outrageous the amount of time that this team seems to have spent just getting out marginal amounts of content. Still, only the short bow is ready for release. Short bow is basically one of the worst weapons they could give us. Shortbow is only usable by Ranger and Thief, 2 of the 9 professions. So sure, it can make sense to repurpose that team, especially considering that legendary weapons may be only a small niche of the community are going to be doing. A lot of people might consider with their playtime, the amount of hours they spend in the game, that legendary weapons aren't something they're ever going to do. But what is everyone going to do? Well, maybe Living World style content. I get it, I can see the logic there. But I think this is being tackled in the complete wrong way. This is a pretty controversial thing because even still to this day, ArenaNet are selling Heart of Thorns based on the premise that there's a full set of legendaries with it. There are definitely people out there, now I will hold my hands up, I personally am not someone who bought Heart of Thorns just for legendary weapons, but there is definitely a large portion of people out there who perhaps they didn't buy Heart of Thorns exclusively for legendary weapons, but factored legendary weapons into their purchase, who are now essentially being falsely advertised to. And yes, I do mean now, I do mean the present day. This is kind of funny. It's a little bit like the free-to-play offers and the issues they had there, probably through an oversight. You can still, to this day, go to the Heart of Thorns main website, and on there, it's still advertising that a full new set of legendary weapons will be coming out, slowly dropped in throughout the year. Yeah, I'd change that if I were you at some point soon, ArenaNet. But it's not just that they're selling Heart of Thorns, advertising the legendary weapons that make this such a sour thing in my mouth, that make me think this is a mistake. It's the comments we've been hearing since even back to 2013, as I mentioned. Way back then, the whole precursor crafting story began, where ArenaNet announced to us that in this year, in 2013, we'd be getting new legendary weapons, and it didn't happen. In 2014, it didn't happen. In 2015, we were told it was going to be with an expansion that everyone was working on. Only 3 got released. Late for the expansion, might I add, only in an update after Heart of Thorns came out, and now finally in 2016, 3 years after their initial statement, they're hammering a nail in that coffin and saying, look, it's basically just not happening. Surely Mike should see the value in actually delivering on one of their most long-standing promises they've been giving us? Who knows what's going to happen, for what it's worth, to the mace, or was it the hammer they said that was also nearly finished? Is this work that's already been done just going to be held in stasis? And okay, it's disingenuous to look back at this now famously well understood as over-promising 2013 blog post, but this goes on to even recent comments. Yes, marketing alongside Heart of Thorns. You had a Twitch stream at TwitchCon, we had blog posts, we had Reddit threads, we had forum posts, we even had a really recent stream talking about future legendary weapons after the original 3 that was just a matter of months ago. These guys seemed genuinely enthused about what they were trying to make. There were countless conversations and mentions from those devs that they'd basically spent a year designing a system that would allow them to easily put more legendary weapons in the game and sustainably put them in the game, that Mike is now essentially scrapping. Are you really telling me that this was the only solution to your problem of not having enough Living World content going out? To scrap the legendary team? In the face of what you've marketed this expansion on, in the face of the amount of effort that's gone into producing this, hell, the only reason we have collections at all in this game was as a prototype for future legendary weapon crafting. And sure, the collection system has still found use elsewhere. We're going to continue getting legendary backpacks and legendary armor, but if it works for that stuff, why can't it work for more weapons too? In the face of already having a reputation for scrapping systems too quickly that you've spent a long time developing. Sunk cost fallacy be damned. This team may be developing things slowly, but I don't think the solution is to give up on it already. And so I don't blame people at all for being upset about this, even if, like me, they weren't super interested in crafting a legendary for themselves just yet. You have to put this in context. I know it may seem like they're not important, but the truth is Heart of Thorns has underdelivered in more places than just this. World vs. World is in a similar situation. Fractals are in a similar situation. It doesn't take much to find a place where ArenaNet have overpromised and underdelivered. And that is not something they can get many more free passes on right now. That's not something you want to be known as a company in any industry or service. So what else could they have done? I do want to get into a bit of a discussion about this. I would say, first of all, I do give Mike some kudos here because he's made a very difficult decision and he hasn't hidden away from it. My first thought actually was, wow, look, we get to see him doing something in the capacity of game director. I know that might sound funny, but, you know, you read the Colin Johansson AMA and you hear that Mike's going to become the game director for a little while. I would just expect him to sit back and keep things steady. You wouldn't hear too much from him, and eventually maybe things would start to change for us. But this is a pretty extreme thing. He's gone forward on, he's been honest about it, he's been blunt, and you need to appreciate the communication here. You need to appreciate the candor. Understand this, it would have been far easier for Mike to have said nothing. Just don't talk about it. Just don't have those legendary weapons released for a year or so, and then long after the decision's been made, long after those 6 people have been working on other things, and actually have created content they can say, hey, this is what we've now made, then announce that legendary weapons were discontinued. Do it long after the fact, so people can't be so angry. So that the second you announce it, way after the fact, you can counter any criticism by saying, oh yeah, we pulled them off of legendary weapons, but these 6 people now did this. These 6 people now did this, and this, and this. But Mike can't do that in this world. What he's chosen to do instead is tell us, be blunt, be honest, do the good thing. Tell us when the decision's made so that nobody's expecting legendary weapons for a year without any official word on it. But as a consequence, he has to sit there and promise us that these 6 people are going to do something worthwhile, that it is a good decision, with no evidence to back it up. Mike understands this fact. He's backed himself into a corner to do the right thing, and he gets some kudos there. But people will wonder, what is it these 6 people are going to give us? What can Mike respond to that with? Another empty promise. Just some wishy-washy bullshit that it's going to be okay, and we just have to wait and see. Naturally, that isn't going to go well for people. Naturally, people asked, hey, can you give us some evidence of what we're going to get out of this? I mean, we're losing legendary weapons. Can you give us an example of something that's coming faster? Is Living World going to come out quicker, for instance? Well, to this, you'll be happy to hear that Mike does once again respond. So this is what he says. You've asked if it means Living World can come sooner than July. Full story episodes have a long lead time. But don't think that Living World content has to be all about the episode. So, ... maybe. But I'm not here today, mate, to make predictions or promises. I'd rather we start by shipping, then talk about what we shipped. Great. Not exactly a very satisfying response, is it? Like I say, he's being wishy-washy. I get it, Mike. You don't want to make the promises anymore. Now, for what it's worth, my theory based on this comment and just kind of the way that they've been doing things in the last year while they were working on Heart of Thorns, I actually don't think these 6 people will be working directly on Living World Season 3. I think this is much more likely to be these 6 people add in these little flavor updates. Remember last year where we had Black Lion chests coming alive and moving around in New Lion's Arch? The small updates, the little things that make the world feel alive, right? That, you know, maybe have a couple of little Reddit threads about the mystery of something going on, like small hints. I'm guessing that's what they're going to be doing, and that doesn't excite me a particular amount either. Maybe it's wrong for me to make these speculations, though. Sometimes I do wonder if they're being a little bit too transparent, because that's what this is. It's transparency. It's just not the news that you want to hear. All they've basically done here by telling us exactly how many devs are working on each different area of the game and telling us all of their big plans and hopes for the future is create a largely uninformed audience who's trying to tell them how to make their game. They've solidified this idea in the minds of their audience that they've got this moronic legendary weapons team who are completely incompetent, spend a year designing a system that will no longer be used, that they can't add to quickly enough, and have basically failed in their job to ship anything after the expansion. Are people really going to feel comfortable knowing that these 6 people are going to another team? I mean, do we really think they're going to do anything better there? And maybe that's just wrong, right? Like, I'm sure all game companies have their bullshit. All game companies have things that go wrong. Maybe this legendary weapon team have perfectly legitimate reasons for not having been able to develop any of this stuff. Maybe they've been getting pulled onto other teams themselves far too often. Maybe a real-life disaster's hit one of them. Whatever. It might not be our place to say. Right or wrong, I do mention this stuff for a very good reason, and that's because people have taken what the devs have told us, what we learned, particularly in the Colin Johansson AMA, where we heard where all the different devs were portioned out at the company, to give a potential solution. Here's the main thing on everyone's mind. You guys told us you have 70 devs on Expansion Pack 2. Why are you choosing to obliterate the legendary weapon team instead of pulling devs from there? And hey, at first, that may seem like a really good point. And it's especially a good point when you look at some of the quotes from Mike just a couple of weeks ago in the Colin Johansson Leaving AMA, where he says exactly this: "My goal now is sustainability. We shouldn't ever have to sacrifice live to ship an expansion." Isn't this sacrificing live to ship an expansion, Mo? So yeah, the proposal would be take your devs from expansion pack 2, assess what is exactly is wrong with the legendary weapon teams separately, sort out their issues, and there you go, you get your quicker living world and you still get your legendary team. As for feeling bad that expansion pack 2 doesn't have so much development time on it, who cares? You need to prove to your community first and foremost you can make a full expansion now. Who would be interested in expansion pack 2 when the original Heart of Thorns was so lackluster anyway? And I can see people's point who are saying this. I'm not so hot in this corner, I must be honest. First of all, it's not necessarily true that these 70 devs are all appropriate minds for suddenly being shifted over to Living World updates. We just don't know that. I go back to what I said earlier about how this transparency has created an audience of people telling the devs how to make their game, when we don't really know. None of us have got a clue who those 70 people are or what they're talented at. Maybe that idea doesn't mean anything. But further, I don't like the idea because I want them to stay split between making the expansion and Living World. Why? We've already seen the other world, guys. We've already seen the world where they dedicate 100% on Living World and then they dedicate 100% on Heart of Thorns. And what did we get for that? We got Living World Season 2, a year of nothing, and then something as small and rushed as HOT was. I would still much rather they have 70 people there working on it over a long period of time than forcing everyone to do it very quickly while we sit in a content drought. You know, I would much rather have the guys, for example, developing the next elite specializations. I would rather they have the time to mull it over for 2 to 3 years or however long they want, rather than forcing them to rush through it in like 9 months, having huge reworks done to them at the last hour on some of them, as we saw with the Dragon Hunter, as we saw with the Tempest. And in the end, they end up releasing something really mediocre or just plain uninspired. Like, as I say, I believe that the Tempest was. So, no, I would be very hesitant to say, oh, the solution is easy, you should just get rid of the expansion. Look, you're being a hypocrite. You're saying you weren't going to sacrifice live for expansion, but that's exactly what you're doing. I think rather, the legendary team just needed more time, and the problems inherent to their group and why they were slow with things are what needed to be assessed. Like, it's very easy to make the raid comparison. Many people are doing this too. You know, how is it possible that a legendary weapon team can't do a couple of damn collections every quarter, while we have the raid team, on the other hand, not only producing a raid wing with all that content, but they have collections in there too for the armor. Well, the ironic thing about a statement like that is you might even find the people from the legendary team are creating the collections for the raid team. But I do think that there's a value in that comparison, because I do think there's a world where once you work out the issues that the legendary weapon team are suffering from, that they could be producing stuff just as efficiently as, say, we see the raid team currently is. That would be my solution. I admit it. It's not much. I think it would be very wrong for me to come online and say, oh, I've got a huge problem with getting rid of legendary weapons without at least proposing some solution. But how much merit it has, who really knows? I don't work in the games industry. I'm not going to pretend to. All of that discussion aside, though, there is one thing that I definitely take a lot of issue to with Mike here that I've got to point out. It's another one of his quotes, and it's related to something I just mentioned in this very video. Why would we want to buy Expansion 2 when Expansion 1 was so short, so mediocre, and so unfinished, right? Why would we do it when Expansion 1 really didn't deliver in many places? People in the forums were basically saying this. They were coming out with, all right, ArenaNet shipped basically half an expansion. What do you have to say about this? All right, and so this is Mike's response, okay? He says, obviously, I go into this thread knowing that some players will be very upset about the lack of legendary weapons. That's why this was such a tough decision. And, you know, I applaud him for wading through this. And so he singles out a few people on the forum, and he says, you guys have each posted a variant of an accusation I've seen many times over the past few months on the forums. Something along the lines of, ArenaNet shipped half an expansion with Heart of Thorns. And he says this, he says, I take issue with that. We shipped a new region full of content, a new mastery system, gliding, guild halls, a new profession, 9 new elite specializations for existing professions, and more. Then we shipped precursor journeys for existing legendaries and said, we've been working hard on new legendaries, the first handful of which will be introduced in Heart of Thorns, with more to come in subsequent updates. While I fully get that you are disappointed today, this is not about us shipping half an expansion pack. Yeah, except it is, Mike. You can butter it up in this comment and you could say, oh, we released a whole new region, but just because it looks good on paper doesn't mean you're actually fooling anyone. You released 3 maps that can be played in a conventional sense, plus the Dragon Stand, which is so heavily tied to its one meta event chain, you almost can't consider it as content for anything else. 3 maps. And a lot of the stuff you're listing are things people still have heavy problems with and need serious TLC. The guild halls, for example. You end this post by saying this has nothing to do with shipping half an expansion pack, but it has everything to do with you shipping half an expansion pack. Heart of Thorns was sold as having a new set of legendary weapons for people, which we are now not getting. Alright, I can understand being proud of what you have made, okay? And I would seriously question anyone at ArenaNet who is in their job at the moment and lacks any pride over their product. That probably suggests they don't have any heart in it. That probably suggests that they're not doing the best job they can. So yes, I'm happy to see we have a game director here who is proud of Heart of Thorns. But I think he is being straight up disingenuous here. And I think there are going to be real problems if he genuinely thinks that the scope of Heart of Thorns was acceptable. Mike must know that Heart of Thorns is not as big as it should have been. He knows that the comparisons to the Guild Wars 1 expansion packs, for example, do have some validity. Yes, they're bunk in many, many, many ways, and Guild Wars 1 is very different to Guild Wars 2, and they ran themselves ragged in Guild Wars 1, but he knows what his audience is expecting. He knows that the price comparisons, $50 for Guild Wars 2 versus $50 for Heart of Thorns, and the content contained within each of those products, he knows that comparisons like that also have some validity. He knows that the player retention that Guild Wars 2 has experienced after Heart of Thorns, across specifically PvE and World versus World, has been crappy, right? Even as an MMO dev, he can expect that, you know, doing the expansion format, people will spike in, you'll have a high population spike, and then it will go away. Even knowing that, he knows that Heart of Thorns post-population could be better. The Guild Chat live streams are only getting 300 to 400 viewers now, and that's for a reason. And that reason isn't that the streams have somehow diminished in quality and that Guild Chat is suddenly so much worse. It's because your expansion lacked quantity, it lacked scope, it lacked content, and you can't go onto a forum telling people that there will be even less content in the future and still act like what you've produced has been up to scratch. You assured people there would be live updates to remedy this lack of content, and they are absolutely not doing that. If there's any time for Mike to show, yes, I understand that there was not much content with this expansion, this was it, and he's failing to do so. So what is this? Is this him hiding it from us to try and save face? Or does he genuinely think that Heart of Thorns was big enough? Because I'll tell you one thing, if it is the latter of those two scenarios, I think you'll find a lot of people, myself included, who are absolutely not interested about buying future expansions, and by extension of that then, being in the franchise at all any longer. That is a worrying as hell thought. So, to fight a little bit more for Mike, on the other hand, to be in his corner, he knows it's a controversial decision, and he knows that he can't make any more promises. He's straight up said that. I do appreciate the candor a hell of a lot. The one thing that worries me a little bit is he keeps talking about, oh, look, you will see the fruits of this decision, this horrible decision. We can prove to you that we can do this. Don't worry, I'm trying to entertain you. I'm trying to make you enjoy the game. I don't want to argue with you. I want to entertain you. Let me go off. Let me do my job. I really appreciate those things that you're saying. But the thing that kind of worries me is he keeps talking about April. There's constant mentioning of, oh, look, April, where is going to be good. A big part of me is scared that this is just going to amount to something small that isn't going to appeal to everyone. I think the worst case scenario, honestly, is this is some big Super Adventure Box update. Everybody loves to joke about how Super Adventure Box needs to come back and so on. But really, those comments people make about Super Adventure Box, you have to take with a grain of salt. I would be really scared if ArenaNet are sitting on something in the can that they're trying to surprise us with, and they think that that's going to blow everyone's problems away. Mark my words, it won't. SAB isn't the whole game, and as much as people rant and rave for it, it's not going to assuage the masses for very long, if at all. Maybe that's just a bit of tinfoil hat territory for me there. Obviously, SAB hasn't even been announced, but the amount of things we actually have on a list we know is coming with the spring content update is still very, very, very small. A little bit more kind of on Mike's side as well. It's been really interesting how quickly since Colin left, people have basically started saying he didn't know what he was doing. You know, there's a lot of sentiment out there, and I can understand where people are coming from, saying, look, you shouldn't be angry at Mike, all right? Mike's made a difficult decision, but one he had to come to. They're spread too thin. Mike is doing damage control based on terrible decisions that Colin Johansson made while he was there, and this is what you have to have as a game director. If you guys want to see change, if you guys want to see they actually put out sustainable, high-quality content in the future, that's going to mean compromise, right? It doesn't mean that Mike can magically make everything hunky-dory and wonderful. It's going to mean that some things have to be reined in so that other things can thrive. I can see that, and I can see why people would say, let's at least give them some time, and I think I'm definitely in that camp too. The fruits of the decisions Mike makes, we're not going to see for a long time, okay? If you live in the real world, you know that when someone makes a decision, it takes a while for that decision to manifest, especially for us as an audience. There are development times, there are release schedules. There is going to be a lag here, and being angry today is not what people should be, perhaps, but maybe they should be angry a little bit further off in the future. So that's about it, guys. The one thing I would implore you to do and to take away from my video here, my one piece of advice for you would be this. Be very careful and aware of yourself when armchair speculating about how a company you have no affiliation with actually works. Yes, we have little pieces of information about where various devs have been assigned with various jobs, but that does not put you in a position to say with 100% certainty you know how that company should be ran. You're kidding yourselves if you think that's true. I'm pretty sad about things, but I guess we'll see how the spring update goes. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoy. I'll see you next time. Chapter 5 complete! Chapter 5 complete. That signals one thing, guys. The very end of the game.